Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Joseph Bryant Jr. I'm the National Sports Director for Rainbow Push, doing continual work in the area of gender equity in sports. Part of the battle, part of the fight is always for equality and opportunities. And Reverend Jackson has always encouraged us to make sure that every platform is opening doors and allowing access to opportunities to those that aren't always included. And so we've been building this conversation. I'm really thankful for all the women who've been a part of the dialogue. And now my sister from the ATL is coming on board, and I'm just excited to hear from her. And she's coming on, not only as a former baller, but now a business guru. And so, NAKIA Sanford, it's good to have you on again. Thank you for taking the time.
It is exciting to be on with you again today myself. Thank you, my brother, for having me on.
You do so many awesome things. And so I don't even know where to start outside of the fact that, part of a conversation is looking at women in sports and really the journey, the path, and a lot of the differences that we see between male and female sports. Talk a little bit first, though, just so the people can know a little of your background. Tell us about your journey into basketball and to pro basketball and how that was for you as you committed to the process of just being your best so you could be at the top of your game.
Well, I have a little bit of a different story than most of my friends, my basketball sisters. They was like, yeah, I've been wanting to play basketball since I was like knee-high to a grasshopper. I was actually track and field athlete first. So I'm a double state champion here in Georgia, track and field as well as basketball. And for me, just being a little brown girl from Georgia, like nobody in my family played sports. I wasn't exposed to sports, so I'm a little different. So even now people start talking to me about sports and I'm like, yeah, let me go research that a little bit for some things. But I played I played at the University of Kansas under Marion Washington, who was also an Olympic coach. She was the only Black female coach that I knew coming out of high school. At that time, of course, we have the historic Vivian Stringer and a slew of others as well, but that was when I was exposed to. University of Kansas, I stopped playing basketball, and that was when the WNBA was like 3 years old, I believe. And I'm like, hey, that little WNBA thing looks kind of fun. And so I was actually an assistant coach at Topeka High School in Topeka, Kansas, and waitressing at a steakhouse. And I'm like, God had that little itch. I just had this itch. I was like, I think I'm supposed to be doing something else. And so I had a decent college career. But if you lined up my high school basketball team, it was like, which one of them going to go pro? It probably wouldn't have been Kia. So it was kind of funny that I ended up turning that into a 14-year professional basketball career. I played a majority of my years with the Washington Mystics for 8 years there. And then I was in Phoenix for 2 years. And then I did my last half season was in Seattle, and also played internationally in 8 different countries. So 11 years in the W, 14 years total overall.
We've been celebrating the WNBA, obviously this year, the 25th anniversary, and just really appreciate the impact that the WNBA has had in the sports arena altogether. But, one of the things that you mentioned about your own path, not only having other things that you did as a career before and obviously now, but playing overseas. Talk a little bit about that, because that's a huge difference. A lot of times, the casual fan may not realize when we talk about gender equity in sports, these other guys aren't going over, KD and LeBron and Steph, and, they're not trying to play other than the Olympics. They're not trying to find gigs in the off season because they don't have to. Talk a little bit about that, because it's a very unique challenge to the women's game, because you all literally have to find more opportunities to play.
Yeah, we play year round. And I will tell you this, most of the men that I know that played sports have an enormous amount of respect for female athletes, because they understand that not only do we go through the gruesomeness of and gruelingness of a season, even though it's a shorter season than the NBA, but we play year round. So I might have gotten a 1 week break in between my seasons. If I was lucky, it was 10 days. So for us, on a financial perspective, and also because this was our job, we viewed this as our job. This was our career. We didn't want to sit on the sidelines for 8 months and wait to go, and wait to play. We had to make sure that we were honing our craft as well. The opportunity to play overseas for me, again, I'm from, a small family in Georgia. Like we never imagined, going to the places that we went. So that was an enormous opportunity and I was very blessed. But you're right. We don't have, it's changing. My niece, was like, TT, oh my God, Candace Parker's on the front of, 2K. Like she's like super excited about having the opportunity.
Yeah.
So we're starting to get some more opportunities out there on the financial side of things. But yeah, just about 90, I would venture to say 97 to 98% of all WNBA athletes are playing overseas.
And that's part of the planning process. This is something that, the sisterhood talks about, being around WNBA players for the past 5 or 6 years, hearing the dialogue about how they make their money, how they ensure that, there's a love of the game. Yes, but there's a financial consideration. And I guess for us as an organization, and Reverend Jackson's kind of tasked us with this, we want to continue to highlight women in the sports world because there needs to be more equity. And we saw some pretty egregious things the past year, the NCAA, that fiasco with, having some, a little throw in together gym compared to, this fitness center for the men. How do you help, not only educate, but empower women and then organizations like ours, or even just advocates in general, to know, hey, we still got a long way to go because, women aren't treated fairly, even though they're playing the same game. There's some things that should be no brainers. And unfortunately, women are getting the short end of the stick.
I have had this conversation amongst my, sisterhood quite often. And I'm I'm a very realistic person. Okay. I'm not, when we're talking about equity in sports for women, we do have to be realistic about the bottom line and the numbers, right? But part of that is just heart. And part of that is who's around and who's making those decisions. And so what I feel like is happening, and I see that happening on the NBA side. I mean, I'm seeing my basketball sisters like get in these front office positions and they're passing that, because once you go through the door, you bring other people with you. And Nike, Amazon, the NBA, they're all making these strides to make sure that women are a part of the conversation, but also in positions where they're part of the decision making. And I think that's where the difference is. When you look at the leadership across the NCAA, who made that decision? Like, there clearly wasn't a female athlete on that board. And I need to look that up. Now that I bring it up, I want to see, because what happens is once you have people, it's like the same thing as diversity. When you have more culture at your table you're making decisions as an organization, you're going to make different decisions because you have someone who has Hispanic background, someone who's African American, someone who has a different background. The same thing with the NCAA. I'm like, who approved this? Someone approved that. And so I think having more women who were not ex-athletes. I was corrected on that a while back. Once you're an athlete, you're an athlete. More athletes on those boards and in those positions will make a difference and move that forward.
Absolutely. And I tell you, being an athlete, male or female, one of the things that you end up having is a sense of camaraderie that just lives. It's a different thing though with the women's sport. And I applaud the WNBA in particular. How did you feel this past year watching your sisters really take hold of social justice issues? I mean, the brothers, the fellas, they did fine too, gotta give them their props, but the women took that thing to another level. I mean, everything from, the unfortunate killings of Black men and women, the whole, push to register to vote, getting behind a candidate to vote, I mean, just things that they said, we're going to all get in on this, we're going to all kneel, we're going to all wear the shirt. How did it, make you feel watching that as a part of your fraternity, just taking, ownership of those moments and say, hey, we've got this platform, this is how we want to use it?
I was extremely proud. Dr. Bryant. I can't I think that doesn't even seem like a big enough word. What I also loved about that moment was you saw Black women in a position on a platform that were not just happy to be there, but wanted to make some changes. But then on the other side, you also saw what real America looks like in a lot of corners when you're not, when we're not polarized. My white sisters, my international sisters, my Latina sisters were all joining hands and wearing t-shirts as well. And for me, I feel like that's how we make great change, because we have to do it together. And so what made me most proud was just to see my sisters taking a stance, but also showing America and women in general, hey, listen, we do have a voice. There are some things that we can do. And when you get put on a platform, it is your responsibility.
Sure.
It's your responsibility to make sure that you're not polarizing, but you're bringing people together.
You've transitioned into something pretty positive, and I want you to just talk a little bit about how you both empower women from your seat, as well as the fact you've used that same message to put yourself into this, as I look behind you, the RVP position that you're in. It's been a path for you.
I forget sometimes.
It's a path and a testimony. So just talk about it.
So, as far as my sisterhood is concerned, it was, Rusha Brown. And I have to give my sister props, because she was the connecting piece for most of us, because the W is still evolving. There wasn't a lot of space for retired players to figure it out. The NBA had to evolve there also. So we have these conversations, and my sister Rusha has been phenomenal and instrumental in gathering us. And now the NBRPA has now welcomed a space for former WNBA athletes as well. So definitely applaud them. And Scott is doing a great job over there. Scott Rochelle is doing a great job over there of making sure that we have a safe space. And Rusha, of course, has been the spearhead in connecting us all. So these are just conversations that we have. And, from a transition perspective, I was just extremely blessed. I get my sense and sensibility from my mama, and my daddy was the consummate entrepreneur. I just knew when I retired that I didn't necessarily want to do like 9 to 5, that I wanted to work for myself, because I saw so many places around me where people were unhappy. So I just had to do some research. I Googled, what do athletes do well in? Like, I'm such a nerd. But everything was sales, and I didn't know anything about sales, and I didn't want to go into sales. But I did a lot of research. And so transitioning into financial services, there were 2 main reasons that I decided to make that transition. The first was, I was like, oh, great. I can be the only one in the room again, and make sure that I'm not the only one in the room, because I was used to being in places and spaces where I was the only person that looked like me. And then the second reason was because I didn't have a me when I was playing ball.
Wow.
And I know I went to a box firm and said, hey, I had a comma in my bank account. I'm like, I'm from here. What do with this? And so, I went to a major financial services company, not knowing that you don't walk into their office, they call you, right? And so I was like, hey, I want to open an investment account. It was like, yeah, you need $250,000 just to talk to me. And I remember that feeling of like, wow, I thought I had been super successful. And I was a female athlete, and we make more money now. But to me, that I had a lot of money, right? To have someone tell me I didn't have enough. I wanted to be the person for my fellow athletes and other hardworking Americans that I didn't have when I was working my hardest. And I also wanted to be a representation. I knew no business women. I knew no Black business women.
Wow.
I knew no women, period, in financial services, and specifically no Black women in financial services. So I wanted to be what it was that I wanted to see, and that was important to me.
Well, we're going to continue to invite you to moments like this and celebrate you in moments like this, because not only do you have such a strong voice and advocacy for women in sports, as a woman in business, I think you're worthy of celebration and appreciation. And I'm going to make sure that anytime we have moments like this, not just when we have women in sports conversations, but now you can actually wear both hats as a woman entrepreneur, women in business, financial services. We do so many things in that vein. And so I want to include you in that work going forward. Tell the people how we can find you. And for those of us that don't have any comments yet, we could start somewhere with you. How do we get in touch with you? How do we find you? How do we connect with you to get some help?
I would say the easiest way is to just find me on LinkedIn, send me a little note. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. I do have IG. Of course, my niece told me Facebook is for old people, but I'm on there.
Yeah, I get it. I hear that from my kids too. Yep.
I'm like, oh, I know, right? Okay, so I do have an IG page. I don't use it as much, but SS NAKIA is my IG. NS43 is my Twitter, but the most direct way to find me is to find me on LinkedIn, or feel free to shoot me an email, nakiasanford@yahoo.com, or find me on all the platforms under my name.
LinkedIn is a spot for people that are doing business, and you're doing it, and you're doing it well. I appreciate you so much because you always have so much to contribute, so much to add, and so much value to conversations like this. And people just need to know how amazing you are. So thank you, NAKIA, for taking the time. And we're going to continue to not only encourage women in the athletic world, but we want them to be like you and say, hey, you know, when I finish playing ball, we do have more to do. We do have more impact to have. And just as a side note, I'm sure you still got some game too. So, you know.
I mean, you know, I got just a little something. Thanks so much, Dr. Bryant. I really appreciate
I appreciate you.
Allow me being part of the conversation.
You're always awesome. Everybody just know that my sister's available, so you can begin to put some commas into your digitized bank world. And at the same time, appreciate you for what you mean to the sports world and now to the women in business. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.